questions? Yeah, sorry, Doug.
Yeah, so this is, you're wanting, no parking that would be permanently, not restricted hours and those in sort of parallel with your hours, but.
It can be, you know, but we're really, our big concern is, the mornings and the afternoons during the pickup and the drop-offs.
Lisa?
It sounds like you need longer than the school day though, because the school day usually ends at, I think those signs usually are like 7 to 4.
Yeah, so
it sounds like they might need longer than that.
we would probably need about an additional 2 hours, but again, we're willing to take whatever we can get just to safely load the guys on and off.
6 a.m. to 7 p.m. would work?
Yeah.
And I apologize if I missed it, but what's currently happening now? The cars are double parked and.
Well, the bus is pulling up and it's a pretty narrow street.
Yeah.
So the bus has no place to pull up to the curb. So it's stopping pretty much in the middle of the street. So for about 10 minutes or so, as the buses are unloading, you know, there's a backlog of cars, and then we're also blocking the school buses from the school, because they can't get out. So we're really, you know, again, it's just a place so the street can remain open, so the school buses can keep going, and then,
And there are 12 blind students or children in your facility.
there's 14, they're adults, so they've been there, you know, a pretty long time. You know, a few people have changed, but they're also getting older, and so as we all get older, we get a little slower, so.
Speak for yourself.
Is this a 12-month operation?
Yes, yeah, we're 24/7, so it's a group home.
What's the address of the school?
It's right next door, I have it written down. I actually have it in my, I believe it's 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's us. Yeah, you were asking for the school, right?
Yes.
The school was 48.
They have a lower school.
No, they were right, yeah, they were, the school's 48. Actually, the school's 48 and 50. They take up, 2
A
buildings.
bunch of, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Shall we call the question? All those in
We don't
favor
have a
of?
resolution yet.
Oh, it's a resolution in favor of the requested no parking zone for 2
Parking
spots
spaces.
in front of the facility.
6 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday to Friday.
Yeah, thank you for the details.
You know, before we do this, once we get to full board, we're gonna encounter the same thing that we always do. People are gonna say, you know, what's your general policy? So I think that we should have a policy
Okay,
or we should at
certainly
least
entertain that.
have an answer to that question.
Yep.
Cause I think, to me, it sounds like a no-brainer. This has to happen.
Yeah,
And we just need to be able to speak to why and whether it's part of an overall policy that whenever someone requests it or we evaluate. And I think our policy should just be, we evaluate each circumstance.
right.
And the entire reason we're here is because each request is a unique circumstance and needs to be evaluated, and this one seems, you know, overwhelmingly in favor of
We have
public
another one
safety
with
and.
item 4 for Central Park West,
Sure.
later this evening. The question is, do we want, obviously we're here to give judgment. If it could be formulaic, we don't need to be here.
Yes.
The question is, should we come up with some guidelines as we did for secondary street namings?
You know, there are 2 issues here. One, this is not a typical residence, it's a
Group home.
So, I mean, that part of it would seem like the no-brainer part, that you would do a school.
Primarily blind people.
Serving people with
group home,
disabilities.
or, you know, like,
Yeah, this is
like has Bill, you would definitely want to.
maybe we should consider it in the case of Central Park West, or we can consider it now. Do we want guidelines?
Do you have those guys?
We don't know.
Right. Case by case.
I mean, it might help.
Okay,
with the
I'm in favor of case by case
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
Okay, let's vote on this one. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay. 1, non-committee members, all those in favor? 3, any opposed or abstaining? No. Abstaining. Okay, fine. So the resolution passes. Okay, Lisa,
Yes.
Orman has two resolutions,
Yeah.
and I'll, let you explain them.
So the first one sort of leads into the second one. The first one is really, talking about the crashes in Community Board 7. There have been, in the last 5 years, there have been over 1,900 crashes, causing serious injury to 740 pedestrians and the death of 11. We hear about the deaths, but we oftentimes don't hear about the serious injuries that happen with these crashes. The vast majority of these pedestrian-involved crashes occurred at intersections where people were crossing with the signal and in a crosswalk. Despite this, the DOT has only named one Upper West Side intersection, 96th and Broadway, a priority intersection. To improve visibility and safety at intersections, NACDO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, suggests clearing 20 to 25 feet of space around a crosswalk or about one parking spot. In urban areas, they recommend designing the intersection to facilitate eye contact between street users. And as a board, you guys have passed a lot of resolutions to daylight certain intersections. But as we'll see with the next resolution, sometimes even when we do daylight an intersection, even if we have bollards in those intersections, cars and trucks routinely park in them. And so we are really asking for the DOT to study the most dangerous intersections in our district and to start physically protecting those intersections using curb extensions. That can be concrete bollards, that could be planters, other physical ways of protecting the most dangerous intersections. And that's really it.
Question?
Sure.
How do you define what the most dangerous intersections are? Are they your definitions or are they DOT's definitions?
I think we should go with DOT's.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
I mean,
Just
I
wanna make sure
actually
that's
think you
clear.
guys could determine that. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a combination of what the DOT deems the most dangerous intersections plus intersections that we know are dangerous but haven't had crashes. Because oftentimes they'll say, well, that's not a dangerous intersection, but we all know it's a dangerous intersection.
Okay. So you'll take DOT's guidance into this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
I know when this came up a number of years ago and we called for curb extensions, the DOT came back and said that a lot of intersections had infrastructure problems, like sewer issues, and they can't dig down the way they can't put anything on top. So I'm
Well,
totally in favor of this, but
yeah.
I'm just.
I recognize that. I think most of those circumstances were things with sewage issues and with having concrete that's very heavy. Colleen might be able to answer this better than I could, but my understanding is that we could still put planters or other physical things in the street that aren't that heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are two parts to this, and I'm very, very strong proponent of identifying the top 10 intersections and really working to address them and keep moving down the list to make sure we're always addressing the biggest safety concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And we know what they are. The data are there. It's easy to see. So I think that's definitely, we have to be doing that. The second part of it, though, is what the prescription is. And a lot of these most dangerous intersections that we know are also the most busy intersections, just by definition. So it's 96th and Broadway, it's 96th and West End, it's 97th and West End. Well, actually, that's not. That one was more of a fluke. That hasn't consistently been on the top 10. All of the main east-west corridors, so 72nd, 79, 86, and 96, crossing the main avenues, create big problems. 86 in Central Park West has perennially been one of the worst. So I think the question becomes for each one, what the solution might be. And taking one example, 96 in West End, the redesign of West End Avenue made most intersections on West End Avenue much safer. It made things worse at 96 and West End. It's also a big bottleneck because there's a lot happening with a lot of cars coming in a lot of different directions and a lot of pedestrians crossing. There's a school right there.
Right.
So I think for each one it's a question of, are curb extensions possible given both the infrastructure and given the other challenges, and is it just curb extensions or should other things be happening as well?
Right. Well, that could be, we could add to this, but I think that, like with 96 and West End Avenue, we've had the plastic bollards up and you can see cars routinely run over them. That could be a hit, you know, the bollards are this high.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's some really obvious places where, you know, we have tried to daylight in the 85th and 86th and West End Avenue, we tried to daylight there, but we have cars routinely parking there because it's, even though it's no standing, we don't have any enforcement. So we really need physical infrastructure in the street. It's super cheap, it's easy. I agree we could do other things too, but I think it's a start.
Yeah, I also think
one
that,
of the things that we did do for 97th, 96th and West End was, after the Cooper Stock tragedy, we implored DOT and hounded them for a couple of years. If you make the light at 97th and West End, you can't make the light at 96
Right,
because,
which totally helps.
yeah, so
Yeah.
signal changing also is a safety.
We can come up with a whole host of safety changes, but I think that this is a really important first step, and, you know, whether you word the resolution to say, you know, physical curb extension plus, that's great, but I just feel like it's the best place to start, because we've already started some of this work, and, it just seems like it should be
This
finished.
is, Barbara, and then I forget your name?
Man. Oh.
And then Sarah, and then Ken.
Despite the change in the phasing of the light at 96th Street, 97th, cars continue to race going west on 96th Street. And I think the only solution there really is to put speed bumps in, because certainly curb extensions won't help. You know, just to calm the
You
traffic.
can't put
Colleen.
speed bumps on a street with bus service.
Yeah, they won't let
Yeah.
it happen.
We don't
put speed humps on streets that are
Yeah.
But we could work on that for 97.
Well, when we
That's
put in
also
a
bus
dedicated
lane.
bus lane, we could put the speed humps in Carlin.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, going west there isn't a bus.
There's no bus service going
The bus
west
goes
on
on
96th
97
Street.
going west.
Yeah, yeah.
There isn't a bus.
Is there a turnaround there?
Not west
No.
of West End, there
They
isn't.
come down
Right.
97th Street,
Right, so
and they loop around to
So that could
96th,
work.
and then they go
so the
east.
westbound
Yeah.
traffic
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
on the bus.
Yeah.
There is no bus
Yeah.
service.
So, as far as 96th and West End, which is a very dangerous intersection in part because of all the cars turning and the school right there, you used to be able to get on the West Side Highway at 96th and Riverside. If you still could, there'd be a lot less cars coming down 96th and West End or turning at 96th and West End to the West Side Highway, because a lot of traffic would just be approaching from Riverside, and would make the 96th and West End intersection much less traffic and much less dangerous, in my opinion.
Okay,
It's 95th.
now,
So, coincidentally,
Not
I,
as dangerous.
like 6 months ago, submitted a Freedom of Information Act on DOT about this intersection. And I think that just, it's very clear from their report, that it's very much prioritizing cars, and that a lot of their solutions and recommendations and choices of inaction in this area is because they're concerned about car flow and everything, and it's clearly a pedestrian problem. And I just think that as a transportation committee, we can prioritize the pedestrian rights of way and revisit the area.
yep, and I think the question is how. Doug?
Do we currently have in our possession, the list of the 10 most dangerous as defined by death, crashes, accidents, injury? Do we have that data?
I did it a few months ago,
I don't know if you were
and
here when we
can
mentioned this,
update
but
it.
we suggested that it was gonna be DOT providing us. with
Yeah,
that.
I just heard that, but,
Yeah.
so obviously we would want to review it because there's different ways to perceive that, but clearly crashes, death, injury is very self-evident. So if we had those 10, or maybe even top 15, in case we wanna swap something or make our own determination, then, and I would volunteer that any of us can go to, that's not a lot of intersections to review, you know, with,
It is available on NYC Open Data.
okay,
Or
Okay.
crash number.
thanks.
Sure.
I just was wondering, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the conversation, but I'd love to hear from Colleen your thoughts on the proposal and, you know, if you haven't already given them.
I mean, overall, we welcome any proposal from the community, to improve, an intersection, whether it's re-engineering, doing a neck down, daylighting with no standing. But I think, as Lisa mentioned, the big issue is enforcement, because we can daylight an intersection, but then there would be a car that's park
So then
there.
what about the idea of putting something physical in the space?
Physical, yeah, if we put a planter, that would be great, but keep in mind, we would need a maintenance partner for
What
the
about,
planter.
a lot of cities use granite blocks, like
Yeah.
2-foot high granite blocks.
We
You don't
have
need a
enough
maintenance
granite
partner.
blocks, yes, we can use those, yes, because we do have them on our streetscape projects.
Mhm.
We have them in, 43rd Street, a lot of our pedestrian plazas. I was just gonna say, like, with the, locations that you're thinking of, it would be good to also reach out to the local precinct to ask them what are their top 10, accident-prone locations, to see where they have the highest form of crashes as well.
I thought that data was
you're next.
synonymous, but.
Ken?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up, 96 in West End. My recollection was that we as a committee and as a board, in, a curb extension, and that the, problem was that there wasn't a community partner to maintain it. And, if we're gonna need a community partner on every one of these, that's a real problem. But if you can put blocks there, and blocks don't require a community partner, that's terrific. And also, I would assume that just pouring concrete, like you do on a
No, you don't, but a lot of our safety projects, we like to start out with interim materials and then monitor it, and eventually becomes a capital project down the road, yeah.
But some of these are ones that we already have daylit with bollards, and so we've already gotten that.
We're ready for the next step.
Roberta?
You know, I think the bollards are really important. I mean, my block has, at 70th and Western Avenue, we have 3 neck downs with planters, and my building is responsible for two of the neck downs, and another building does the third one. And we keep it clean, and we put plants in the right season. But, you know, maybe there's a way of getting block associations or some you know, cause 96th Street is at its next to the school, and the co-op across the street wasn't able to take on to sign the contract. So, you know, maybe we should be working with DOT to figure out a way to get a neighborhood association or block association, or, you know, where there's a bid to take on that responsibility.
What is actually involved in maintaining one of these things?
It means that you have to keep it clean, that if there's snow, you have to remove the snow, you know, like you would in front of a building, you know, where your sidewalk is. And then if there's a planter, it means watering plants and
Replanting seasonally.
Take
one on?
So like everyone's in agreement that there should be, that means.
Yeah, thank you for this segue. Is, once we identify the intersection, it's sort of like the no parking zone. You have to, the solution is unique to that intersection. So we're discussing the solutions, but all we're looking for tonight is an expression of interest that we should be looking for the intersections, and we're calling on DOT to begin the process of figuring out what's going to work there.
Yeah,
So we're really wasting too much time going into the exact details of what needs to be done. Rich?
With that in mind, I have 3 thoughts. One, I think a general rule we should have is just plastic bollards, and this gets to your next point, Lisa, don't work. And when we daylight an area with plastic bollards, it makes it worse because we don't have cars there, we have big trucks parked there. And we'll get to that for the next thing, but I think we need a general rule that we can't have plastic bollards and count on them to increase safety, because they do the opposite. Number 2, we get to a general thought of, especially for an intersection, we don't wanna talk specifically about an intersection, but you know, as one example, 96 in West End, are we willing to reduce traffic flow at a very heavily used intersection?
Again, I don't wanna get into we just have to stop identifying the intersections.
I'm just saying.
The solutions are not on the table tonight.
Yeah, but that's gonna be a consideration we need to factor. And my third is, I think, you know, we know the 10 most dangerous intersections, we can work with DOT, but I would propose we get 11 meetings a year, we do 1 a meeting all year. And just say, like, you know, January, we're gonna focus on our number 1 most dangerous intersection. February, and just go one by one. We're gonna wanna walk through the intersections, we're gonna wanna come up with solutions.
Well, we have 10
We could do 2.
presumably coming at us in the next meeting.
Makes it
So,
unnecessarily lengthy.
But getting, you're doing the work to be able to.
I think there is consensus that there is an interest in having the DOT look into this. No substantive decisions on what they should do. So do I hear a motion for a resolution?
I would take it further. I'd say that we should do it on our own and say, like, you know, let's look at these intersections.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear what DOT perceives as the mark.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt list or DOT's list. I'm gonna bet you a good beer that 8 of the 10 are gonna be overlapping anyway. Rich has done work that has identified them, based on crash data and so forth. If we could, between now and full board, compare our list with theirs and come up with, and if it ends up being
Great.
12,
Yeah.
then
And
let's
maybe
make
you
it
could
12.
circulate your list.
NYPD as well.
And if anyone has a problem with something on it, but wants it removed, or one they want added, we can deal with that.
Yeah,
So why don't you take
well,
your-
and Doug's exactly right, we need to get the precincts to
Yeah.
weigh in as well.
Right.
I think
We wanna make sure they're on board.
One of the points on the whole thing though is that there are intersections that we've already identified and we've already daylit that are still problems because there are only no standing zones. So despite them potentially not being the most dangerous intersection like 86 and West
Why don't you
Avenue.
submit a list as well?
Okay.
And we will cull this list, I'll take responsibility for it, and we'll have a list of 10 that we all more or less agree on for the full board. How's that sound? Everyone? Yep.
Maybe for this resolution, we can add on, we also want the DOT to do more than plastic bollards at places where,
Oh,
where
add
they
that.
have put them in.
Yeah.
Are we gonna
That aren't
include the
working.
Center Park Master Bike Lane on that?
That's different.
Cause they're not working there either,
Yeah.
so like, we can,
Okay.
you know, if we wanna
I
do plastic
would
bollards,
be in
like,
favor
we
of
could have a
adding
whole
to the
conversation
resolution
about that today.
they should
Yeah.
figure out what's going to work,
Yeah.
but a specific recommendation that plastic bollards don't seem to be
Yeah.
doing it. Okay, call the question. Oh, do you have a
Just a
comment?
quick point.
Sure.
Is if, when you're doing this stuff on 96th Street, someone brought up, the question of getting onto the West Side Highway. Remember, they're gonna be closing 79th Street at some point, and so.
At some point
96th
is the
Street-
operative term.
Okay,
Who knows?
but again, just, I think it'd be a good idea to keep that in mind, because maybe those two things can go together.
Yes. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those opposed, abstaining? Okay, it's unanimous. Non-committee members in favor? Okay. 4, anyone opposed or abstaining? Great. Okay, Annalise has another.
Yeah, so this segues beautifully into 771 West End Avenue's request. I think many of you were on the committee, at the time that Cooper Stock was killed. We all saw the transformation of West End Avenue, some of the things that we changed and DOT changed, unfortunately, just aren't working the way they're supposed to work. So we have some residents from 771 asking for more. Julie, you wanna start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Julie Coates Margulies, and I'm here with Michael Paul and Lynn Paul, who are from my building, with Jamie Becker, with Barry Zucker. Lynn is on our board. And we all lived in the building when Cooper was struck at 97th and West End. And in response, as you know, the southeast corner was daylit with said bollards. And Barry has a wonderful handout to give you just to demonstrate how ineffective the bollards actually are. So I would say, without exaggeration, at least, folks can correct me, this is just a sampling of how often there are trucks in that corner. You know, a minimum of once a week, probably twice a week, sometimes more. And it really has just become a large truck parking area, from UPS to FedEx to moving trucks to construction trucks to Con Ed trucks. I mean, and it's just sometimes days on end. Many of us, and feel free to jump in when I finish, many of us have approached drivers and said, hey, it's a no standing zone, you're really not supposed to be here. Needless to say, they don't listen. I've approached, and I think many of us have, various traffic cops or whoever are around, saying, hey, there's somebody down there, you wanna go ticket them? They're impervious to the tickets, they get them, they don't care, and so it's, you know, it's dangerous. It's dangerous, that very intersection that everyone worked so hard to daylight is now just blocked by these enormous trucks. I don't know if anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, I'll just say that I have approached these drivers and explained to them that a child had died at that corner. They then tell me that the parish tells them that they can indeed park there and that they should indeed park there to move people in and out, or if they're doing construction work in the building.
Is the heart of this problem that these parked trucks are obscuring the view for people coming
Yeah.
west and making a southbound turn onto West End.
The purpose of daylighting that corner was so that, drivers can see people in the crosswalk, and
Right.
obviously a big truck there is going.
And the irony is, if we had parked cars there, it would be better than all
Yeah.
these
Yeah,
cars.
yeah, shorter.
Yes, it
Yeah.
would,
Yeah.
visibility would be better.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a place that, for the, one of those concrete
concrete.
blocks that we were
Right.
discussing.
Well, and Colleen told me in the spring that you'd be able to do it urgently, and what's happened?
Install a concrete block.
Yeah, you had said in the spring, I think it might have been our March meeting, we talked about this very issue, and you said we could put concrete blocks there.
Probably I might have said that. We would have to check to see if we have it in our yards in stock, to put one there. I'd get back to the community board.
And Roberta, you had said you'd be following up a number of times.
I did send letters to them.
I also wrote a letter to DOT, just asking what was happening and just again highlighting the problem, and
I think of all the places this cries out for some granite blocks or a concrete block.
Yeah.
This
Why don't
is-
we make that a resolution?
Yeah, well, let's have a resolution
Yeah.
that DOT put in some kind of barrier to prevent this kind of idling, as soon as possible.
But clearly, there's a need somewhere near there for trucks to,
Yeah.
temporarily park.
Well, we should have had our loading zones now in West End.
Yeah, whether they're right near there, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Roberta?
So maybe part of the resolution should be that we call on DOT
Find a loading zone.
to
Right,
put a
nearby
loading
loading
zone.
zone.
Yeah.
You know, it might, would it be easier to get planters than blocks? Would your building be willing to take care of the planters?
Well, I can't answer,
Can't
but I
answer.
certainly can present it and say that I would,
It's not a big deal,
Yeah.
it's bring out a
see,
watering can.
I would support it
I mean, even if 3 residents in the building take it on.
I wouldn't, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't wanna go that route, because
No.
when we had the issue with 96 in West End, the co-op didn't wanna take the responsibility and the liability. So I wouldn't wanna put the burden on the building to do that. I prefer to have the granite blocks there, yeah.
Maybe
We
the
had a
health
lot of
club
back
could
and
be a
forth
good
about
neighbor
that.
and do it, because that health club.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark?
Do the granite blocks require a different kind of maintenance than the, planter team?
There
No
are no
maintenance.
maintenance required for
Great.
granite blocks.
Great,
Yeah.
so let's call for granite blocks.
It needs to be
Yeah.
fed every
Okay.
3 days.
Look for a nearby spot for loading zone.
Mineral oil.
Be installed retroactive.
Stitched together. All those in favor? Okay, 3, 9, 10, 11, 12, no.
No, it should be
No,
nine.
it should be 9.
9, sorry. All those, anyone opposed, abstaining, non-committee, members?
Yeah.
4, any opposed? Great, that passes as well. That would really be appreciated.
You never know.
No, tourist intersection.
But there was only.
We have another, request for no parking. It's in front of 25 Central Park West. Is someone here who wants to make a presentation? Okay.
Yeah, I would like to. As you see, I'm here with my service dog Bear. He's a big guy. I'm a handicapped New Yorker, and it's hard enough for me to get around. And with the advent of the bike lanes, things have gotten a little crazier. We have one lane now going, what direction? South in front of our building, and makes it difficult for emergency vehicles. It makes it difficult for anybody to get through. If, I'm getting out of a car, someone's unloading, it's impossible. But I would like to add a few things besides that, which I had written about in some letters to the board. If a car is going north on Central Park West, it's illegal to make a U-turn. And so for me to get access to the building, I have to make sure this dog is safe. He's a certified service dog. He takes care of me, but part of my bargaining with him is I have to keep him safe. And I get tested on that for 3 years in a row, written tests, practical tests. It's a very serious thing. He's not an emotional support dog. But for me to get out of any vehicle on 63rd Street, right now, that entrance to our building is parked chock-a-block during the day and on the weekends with commercial vehicles. And there is no way for me to safely exit from a vehicle to that entrance on that street. So that's something that's really important to me, and I would imagine anybody who's handicapped and can't fit through a space this big of parked cars. Additionally, our building has an entrance on 62nd Street, which is totally handicap accessible because it doesn't have any steps. It's a totally ramped entrance. So again, for anybody who's handicapped to be able to have access, it's extremely important, and we don't have that now. It's hard enough for me to get around. Having these other impediments make it even harder. The other thing that, we've noticed, in terms of what's going on is we respectfully request that some bike signaling, mechanisms are put in, because the people who bicycle are, wantonly at times ignoring pedestrians, traffic signals. There's a man who testified who lives in our building, big guy, I don't know how you miss him, shock of white hair, 6'3", stepped off the bus, got hit by a hit-and-run cyclist, he needed 8 stitches. Bikes are not using their lights at night, and when I cross the street or anybody crosses the street, even in the crosswalk, we now have to cross the bike lane. And my husband and I were just crossing 61st Street the other day, the two of us with the dog, we almost got nailed, and we had the green light. So we desperately, and I dare say not just by our area, but all the neighborhoods in the city, really need more bicycle lights, guidance, and enforcement, all of that. We, as pedestrians, there's some difficult intersections, we just wanna stay safe, whether it's from a car or a bicycle. And right now, I have to say, while the cars are dangerous, and I certainly am always on the lookout, they seem to obey the traffic signals a little bit more because there's more enforcement. And the bikes are going the wrong way, they're not using the bike lane. We have a lot of footage on video from our building, and Eric, Lyons.
Okay, we wanted to talk about the no parking zone, that's what's
But
on
we'd
our.
like to clarify the resolution to
Okay,
be no standing. No standing.
Thank
and
you.
to your point earlier, probably about 2 car lengths in front of our main entrance on Central Park West. And 1 car length on 62nd and 63rd, for the reasons that Bonnie just mentioned. So I would like to modify the resolution to no standing zones at all 3 entrances of our building. For the reasons that Bonnie mentioned. You can't access the handicapped entrance on 62nd now, because it's chopper block, and you can't get out of a car on 63rd Street or in front of Central Park West, because there's only 1 lane going south now. When you stop and you're loading and unloading, or you have somebody who has a walker or is getting out slowly, the traffic is backed up all the way up 1 or 2
I'll
blocks.
interject here. I know the intersection very well. I live on Central Park West, and I made a drawing of it. The southbound lane, it's backwards. There's only 1 moving lane now.
Right.
So if a car stops to let someone off or to unload or unload, all southbound traffic on Central Park West stops.
Right.
Complete stop. It all funnels into 1 lane, and if there's a double parked car there, there's no movement.
Can you explain
It's
what happened?
It's kind of surprising, Colleen. I just was very.
So when they expanded the bike lane, the plan was to shift over, the lane and get rid of the parking. But there was a need, it's only conjecture why there was a need, but there was a need to keep the parking spots from 62nd to 63rd Street. So instead of losing the parking spots, we lost a southbound lane.
Right.
That was never in the plan.
For the rest of Central Park West, just to review, the one parking lane was removed, and it was used to accommodate the bike lane. Oddly enough, in front of their building and only their building, one southbound moving lane was eliminated. In front of 15 Central Park West, which is just south of them, there are 2 moving lanes and no standing, I think, in front of that building. And of course, the Trump Hotel, there's no standing in front of. So it's literally a unique block.
There's no southbound traffic.
There's no southbound, but there are 2 northward
That's the
moving
reason,
lanes.
there's no southbound, exactly.
So the Central Park West going south, it's 2 lanes the whole way. In front of their building, it's 1 lane, and then it's 0 lanes.
Right.
And it has been narrowed even more towards 62nd Street, so it makes it even worse, because people, and it's an S curve coming from the north.
Oh yeah, it brings all traffic to a stand. I see it all the time.
So the resolution, instead of no parking, we'd like it to be no standing anytime.
And how much space in front of the building?
I'd say 2 car lengths.
2 car lengths. That's very reasonable.
And if you could add 62nd and 63rd.
But one just in front of the entranceway, 1 car length.
In front of the north and south entrances?
Yes, exactly.
Sounds reasonable to me. Comments, questions, criticisms? Doug? Sarah?
What are the parking restrictions there currently? And also, how does this, we were just talking about where there is parking, I know that there's, transit police just in that area, is that?
There are a lot of policemen in that area, and that's one of the reasons it's gotten worse, is that because they have placards, parking placards, so they basically don't, it doesn't matter what the parking rules are, they're parked there and taking up most of the spaces. But it's not just that they're taking up the spaces, there's no gap between the cars to get out of a car into the.
The question, is it alternate side of the street parking? What is there now?
It's alternate side.
The time on Central Park West is Monday through Friday, 8 AM to 6 PM. On 62nd Street, it's, 7 to 7, Monday through Friday. The problem is, all days Monday through Friday, with the movement of the parking lanes, the police who we support are parking on all those streets, so you don't even have room to shift over on a southbound lane. And when you make the turn on 62nd Street, you're bottlenecked with the cop cars that are parked, they're off-duty cops, they're on-duty cops, the trucks that are loading and offloading for buildings for their renovations, whatever the case may be. So you're really at a bottleneck at this point, and there's nowhere for people to actually get off at some point. So we're forced to have people with elderly handicaps, whatever, they kind of stop in the middle of the road to get out, to go to
Is
their
there
home.
signage for transit?
Yeah, Doug?
I'm sorry, I
Sorry.
didn't mean to monopolize, no, I was just asking, clearly there's a transit police hub
At Columbus
there.
Circle.
So my question, are there signs posted now that allow the transit police to be there, or they're
There are no
parked?
Doesn't
signs
matter
that
though,
say-
'cause they don't.
Well, they wouldn't need, right, but I'm just saying,
There used
is
to
it
be
a
signs that
designated
said-
area for that?
There
That's
used
the
to be signs
question.
that said authorized cars only.
Right,
But now
not
it's.
anymore?
It's a separate
Okay.
issue, but they also clog up Columbus Circle.
Yeah.
There's always parking.
They used to be on the east side of
Right.
Central Park West.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering if we should add something to the resolution to ask DOT to relook at that block, cause it sounds like it's more than just this
Yeah,
one
Colleen, could you wait,
know
it's
what
a
I mean?
it's a very odd configuration.
So Penny shared with me the letter that the board had wrote to the community, to the CB. And I forwarded it to my colleagues in our bike program so they can take a look at it, they can reevaluate that block. But as you mentioned, there is the transit development officers who park there, and we've met with them to talk about their parking habits as well. But they need their marked cars parked there, for X, Y, and Z reason for response,
Which they don't.
just so you know.
They do not, they park, I'm very familiar with what goes on. They park down by Columbus Circle, the marked cars, and the unmarked cars. These are personal
These are
cars for the
personal
people
cars.
that are.
Yeah, they're personal.
We actually spoke to them about their personal cars.
Yeah.
Sarah?
So, and then my other, comment, I guess, was gonna be that I totally support this, but we have passed resolutions like this before, only to have them fail at the full board. So I'm wondering
Well,
if
I'll
there's
weigh in
something.
on that. I think the Central Park West situation is untenable.
true.
All southbound traffic comes to a dead stop
Yeah.
if someone that's
I'm just
totally
wondering if
untenable.
the
It's the north and
three-
south
yeah,
entrances to the
yeah,
building.
that's gonna be
That could be a problem.
too much.
So it sounds like we have two issues. And the first issue is Central Park West, which has to be dealt with.
Mhm.
The second issue, also, like I said, for the first one, seems a no-brainer. It's just
Right.
a matter of what the solution is, and it's greatly impacted by the first issue.
Maybe it's two resolutions.
So, yeah, I think it has to
Maybe
be
it's
two separate things we have to deal with.
Maybe we remove 3 spots on Central Park West. I don't know.
Well,
Mark?
is it a matter, do
Does
we
it
have to
make
remove
sense
all this?
Does it make sense to line up the loading zone as your, I'm gonna call it a loading zone, but does it make a sense to have a right to turn dedicated lane there? I'm wary of removing
Well,
more
that's all
parking
you
than
can
we
do.
need to on the.
That's all you can do.
That's all you
so
can
much.
do.
You have to go right on 63.
On 62,
That's
on
already
62, on
I mean,
62.
62, you
Yeah.
can't go further south.
And on
Right, so, right,
That's all
so-
it is.
So that's the only.
Basically
so
what
your
it is.
point
Only
is
one
that
moving
it's
lane.
Yeah.
If someone stops, it's, everyone stops.
I'm with you on
Yeah, it's
that, and I
kinda
think
shot.
that is the unique circumstance
Yeah.
that should make, for those of our colleagues who believe that this should only be done when there is a compelling situation, traffic coming to a full stop on Central Park West certainly seems to
Yes,
qualify
that's a
for me.
compelling situation.
Yeah. But then so then the.
So do you wanna
doing it
have
on
2
60
separate
seconds,
resolutions?
63,
I still think the
and
first one has to be Central Park West, because the solution to that might be getting rid of all parking on that block. If we're down to one lane, it's an untenable solution.
So, May I?
Yeah, sure.
That may be the right result, and I don't want to put Inspector Mallon on the spot for his colleagues in the transit, police, but I think that may be the right solution, but we would probably wanna give them a heads up and let them come talk to us before we took that action. But the other action sounds like it's right for a vote right now.
Yes.
I just have a couple process, questions. The first one, because I'm a non-committee member, so it's my first time coming here. My question is, how does this request get in front of the committee? Do they make a formal request for this? I'm just curious how anybody who wants this. How does this come in front of the board? I get it here. No, I'm asking how does something come to you to
The
table
community
it? And
either sends an email to me, to Penny, to Mark, to someone.
So someone
and
just
we
asked
decide
you
to
and
put
then it can hit on.
we
Ad hoc.
decide as merit,
Okay.
and it goes on the agenda.
Okay. Look, I'm gonna pick up on Sarah. First off, I'm very sympathetic to this, and it seems very obvious, as I think all of them will be. And I just think that, as the person who've never been here, the first time this came, there was a lot of concern that there'd be many more, and now it seems like there are many more. And I think there's also going to be many, this has great merit, and they're all gonna have great merit. You know, who's gonna say no to a scenario like this? I just think that this is going to continue. I heard you said that you were gonna do this ad hoc. I think that's a mistake. I'm gonna make just a request. I think you have to have some standards so that people who are not on your committee can feel like they understand it, because it feels like every time someone's gonna come here, it's gonna be a very compelling, unique situation. They all block traffic, so by definition, they're blocking traffic. Anybody who double parks blocks traffic, and I remember the doctor's office, the only compelling reason was that it was blocking traffic, but anybody double block will block traffic. So I'm just encouraging to relook at this, but, you know, we're opening, this committee's opening itself up to have, you know, the floodgates of this opening, and I think that it's a concern, and as a non-committee member, I would feel better knowing that there was some type of standards that you guys had set, as opposed to an ad hoc each and every time.
I think there's something to be said for standards. I just wanna say, as a chair, I think having people come with, issues that have overwhelming merit is the chair's dream, but that's
There's
not
gonna be
really
many
how-
issues, like, my building they just put in a new handicap entrance, there's 2 handicapped people, they're very compelled. I'm sure if they knew they could come, they'll probably be here, and there's handicapped people all over the Upper West Side that are dealing with this, and they probably are all with merit. But if you're prepared to every time, if that happens to do it.
So let's open that, you weren't here at the very beginning, I raised that very issue, do we want standards, and
Well, I heard and I'm picking it up, I didn't hear everything, so I didn't wanna say, but I think that
But I raised
as a
that very
non-committee person, I generally, and Mark knows this about me, I generally try and support the committee members if I don't go. But I would be concerned that every time we're sort of making a one-off, and it'll always make sense, because there'll always be a compelling person who needs to
I'm not
relieve.
sure, that's an assumption, I'm not sure.
That's my
Let's
assumption,
hear from,
that's my assumption, that's all, and I'm just sharing my assumption. I think there's many people that could use
I
relief.
think there are arguments both ways, for standards and for,
As a non-committee person, I'd feel much better when this went in front of me to say, I know there's standards, what were the standards?
Like I don't know if you're here, when I raised the secondary street names, we have certain standards, and
Agreed.
people take comfort in our adherence to those standards. Any other, Ken?
I just think that, I mean, standards sound all well and good, but they're really, at the bottom, very subjective, and it's sort of like the Supreme Court Justice who said about obscenity, I know it when I see it. You know, basically we're talking about when we look at a situation and we think that a loading zone is a higher use of that space than, free parking, and that it's causing more problems, than it's worth. And it's causing congestion, and that's essentially the standard that I think we should be looking at.
Is that the standard?
And that's not really a standard, I mean, it's just something that on a case by case, we look at it and we say, you know, what do we think? You know, is this causing more problems than it's worth, providing this, free place to park? And,
So the free parking is involved in the thing?
yeah, it's part of our calculus.
I don't know.
Yeah.
For Ken.
Yeah, it counts the other way,
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
recognize we're taking away a
That's my
parking
whole
spot,
point.
yes. It should weigh in, of course it should weigh in, that we're taking away a parking spot, it's a bad thing.
Agreed.
One way to differentiate between the secondary street namings and the no parking is that for secondary street namings, realistically, anytime anyone comes here, we're never gonna turn them down. But what we've done is we've said in advance, for you to get this, you have to sign,
Well,
you have to
set
get
a base level
X
of-
number,
To get the
yeah, here are the
petition
rules, you have to get X number
Actually,
of
Rich,
signatures.
we have turned people down when they asked for a block
That
that
is
didn't
true.
actually have a connection to.
That's
Yeah.
true.
We did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
We made them move.
if
That's
they,
true, but
if they
having a
meet
base
our
level
rules,
of-
but
yeah,
we set
having
rules
the-
in advance
yeah,
so that people
yeah.
don't come here saying, yeah, name it after me, no one knows who I am, no one else
Okay,
want
we
agrees.
can talk about standards and theoretical standards all night. Can we, does anyone have any practical standards that they want to
So, yeah, I think
propose?
one is traffic flow.
Traffic flow, very good. Alright.
Two is safety and concern for specific,
Safety's one.
Safety's one,
Pardon my,
please.
Yeah.
interject.
yes,
Number one right now.
yeah, of building residents. So the first case we did.
Request from
was-
building residents, that's something.
But it's, if there are specific residents in a building that have a compelling case.
There's always
And
gonna be-
chances
there's
are
always
they
gonna be
will,
every
they're
time.
coming here.
But that's a
But-
prerequisite, that's right. Mark?
Well, I'm not sure you wanna try to come up with an exhaustive list tonight, but to the
Right.
extent that you are, I would endorse, I would endorse all of that, and then, oh goodness, I'm sorry, call me I'm sorry, it went right out of my head when I was trying to.
So far we have safety, traffic flow, and building residents. You have one more?
No, that
Oh.
would be a different kind of question. Colleen mentioned that, in terms of the traffic police, she went and she spoke to them. My question is,
Transit.
the transit, I mean, you spoke to them, but to what extent and what did you ask them to do? And if you asked them to do things that would alleviate these kinds of problems, have they done it? If they haven't done it, maybe we're talking to the wrong people. Maybe we need to speak to people from transit if that's where the problem lies and we're not being able to get any accommodation from DOT. So, you know, these.
Can I just say, we could add to the resolution that parking should be eliminated. I don't think, we're merely advisory. I don't think that's going to go anywhere.
No, I agree. I'm just trying to figure out what they're talking about.
Parks
so
Department,
that they can
61st
talk
Street
to-
didn't go very well.
Oh, Mark and then Elizabeth.
All right, thank you, I've got it now, thank you. I wrote it down.
Back.
What I was thinking of is, in addition, taking a page from your, street renaming guidelines, block associations, neighborhood associations, surrounding building management, and, if there's a bid, the bid, and if there's not some kind of outreach to merchants to make sure, and now, the right thinking answer would be that a merchant would always be in favor of this because their customers can get to their store, but I don't wanna presume for them, so those are things worth considering. And then I would also propose a catch-all, which is that you still can handle these things ad hoc if there is a compelling case, but now you've got definitions.
Right, but by definition, people seeking it out are going to go to the merchant is gonna say, I don't like it, that's the end of their interaction with the merchant, we'll never hear from the merchant.
Well,
So-
okay, I'm not, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Lisa,
I think
oh, sorry, Elizabeth and Lisa.
Just quickly, we've talked a lot about residents, and I think the residents who are here tonight have brought up great things. That stretch also has people who are not residents who are impacted by this, so I just wanna be careful when if we do make any guidelines that we're not, we said safety of building residents and residents.
Oh, it's
but-
safety was a general catch-all for the whole community.
Okay, as long as it's like a more community focus, I think it's important that
residents,
it includes everyone and not
obviously
just
the building is the most
the people
important, but
who
the
are-
surrounding buildings should also weigh in.
That's
It's
all
the
I
same
think.
thing with the secondary street naming.
Yep.
But I
Lisa,
think
Lisa.
regarding the merchants, the vast majority of us walk or bike to go to visit our merchants, we don't drive. But for the guidelines, I think we should think about the best and highest use for that parking spot. And is it parking, free parking, or is it potentially something else? And I think the reason we're seeing a lot of these is because there's a latent demand for that space. Because, for the last 70 years, it's been parking, and actually it's public space. So
Mhm.
people are saying, hey, I don't have a car, but I would like to use that space for X,
Mhm.
Y, or Z, and I think that's what we're now seeing.
Mhm.
But resident parking also solves a lot of that problem.
More comments, questions? So I'm going to have two resolutions. The first one is, it was 2 spots on Central Park West. That's, to be blunt, a no-brainer. So let's have them separate. That should have no problem at full board. All those in favor of 2 spots in the center of by 25 Central Park West.
No standing.
No
It's
standing.
no
Changing.
standing.
No standing.
2 no standing spots by the entrance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Non-committee members? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Oh, Roberta left. Anyone opposed? Abstaining? Okay, that was the easy one. The north and south entrances to the building. There's actually you can make 3 resolutions because I understand the south entrance is the one with the handicap.
Agreed.
Discuss amongst
And that's
yourself.
We need photographs of this
also the more
building,
complicated one, because
or
it
diagrams.
depends if the police is personal
Where's
cars or
Google
cars in
Maps?
those 2 streets.
Well, I think removing one spot is not gonna be an issue.
Which was the entrance with the existing ramp?
62.
The south side.
Thank you. Okay, so let's do 62nd, that's the easier of the 2. This is a, one handicap entrance, there are 400 units in that building, something?
And it's
Oh,
a
they're also
narrower
doctor's
street.
offices?
It's a narrow street.
Just slightly narrower.
This is the one handicapped
Both
entrance?
Correct.
Okay, all those, unless there.
Are there doctor's offices in that stretch or in that building?
Yes.
Okay, so that should go in the resolution too.
Actually, both sides have doctors, all 3.
All those in favor of having
Is anyone taking minutes?
one, no,
Okay.
no standing, spot
Doesn't
on
ask,
s-
but
cent-
yeah, I reckon.
62nd
Yeah,
Street
morning
and
of the
25
meeting.
Central Park West. Committee
One,
members?
this is one no standing spot?
One no standing spot,
Right.
right in front of the entrance. 9, that's everyone on the committee. Non-committee members, 1, abstaining. Anyone opposed?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're in favor, okay, there are 2. Okay, we got the 2 easy ones. The north side, 1 spot. Anyone wanna weigh in on this?
I just want to say that there's no left turn on 62nd, so if I'm going north, my only option is to make a left on 63rd. So you have to be aware of that as well before you vote. So if I'm going north, I can't turn left on 62nd, there's no left turn.
Right.
The only way to go left is 63rd Street, that's why that's important.
Also, doesn't the Y across the street get a lot of pickups and drop-offs there?
Yeah, this is school right across.
So that gums up.
I'm looking at 62nd, it looks like it's currently no standing.
In front of the entrance?
No.
No.
Maybe it's just closer to the corner?
Yeah, right, well, there's a fire hydrant, I think, right at the corner that, and maybe just for one parking spot.
62nd, on the northbound, northeast corner there is a fire hydrant, and the rest is, 7 to 7, Monday through Friday.
Yeah, it's
Look
no
at the
standing
entrance.
7 to 7.
Correct, which is not the case, unfortunately.
So that's where all the transit police
That's where
come?
the TA,
I could actually speak to them about those, where they put those private, I was with the head of transit police today, if I had known this was coming, I would have spoken.
Wait, Rich, what's in front of the south entrance on 62nd Street? Is that, what, can you just tell me? Is that, what's the rule?
It looks like no standing 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Isn't
Is
that
right?
what we just called for?
Monday through Friday. Well, are we talking?
Is that for the entrance though, or just?
We
at the
need to
corner?
clarify what we
It's
called
in-
for, because it's not alternate right now.
Wow. Colleen?
Because I know I personally know the situation on Central Park West, which is, there's parking there, so our resolution is meaningful. On the south side.
On the
obviously,
south side of the building, it's no standing 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Then our resolution's moot.
No, we're asking for it anytime.
They're asking
Oh,
20.
anytime, okay.
Yeah.
Then it's not moot.
We can't just.
that's in the resolution, that it's already 7
Yeah.
a.m. to
Okay,
7 p.m.
we should put that in the resolution to clarify, because I thought it was alternate side like
Sorry,
everywhere else.
we weren't clear, yeah.
Okay, and now we're on the north side.
North side also says no
Same, it's the same, parking regulation.
except that, trucks.
Oh, actually, right, yeah, on
63rd Street, it's also no standing 7 to 7, except that trucks can park there.
On the south side of the street.
In front of our building on the south side, across from the Y, they can park there, anytime, during the day.
I'm seeing no parking Monday to Friday, 8 to 6. That's not the building. Sorry? No, it's, 25.
I would feel a lot more comfortable if we had, you know, photographs, still shots. I know we're doing this rather ad hoc, but, you know, with other kind of resolutions that we pass, we have visual aids, we have diagrams, and we have current info.
That might be in the
I just feel a little bit unprepared to make a decision. I may very well support it, I just can't see it. Yeah, the no resolution for when someone from the community is requesting that, I think they should come with
enough
photographs,
evidence
diagrams,
to
whatever.
understand
Yeah.
what we're doing.
It's our first time.
No, we're just talking about for the future,
At all, just
for us.
It's just when someone
For the
contacts the
future.
board, we'll have a sheet that tells them this is what you need to bring with you.
Learning process.
Any thoughts on the north side? We did, Central Park West, I can attest to the fact that that's something that had to be done. The south side, we are calling for a no standing, zone 24/7.
It would have to be.
One spot, yes, one spot.
Are U-turns illegal in Central Park West?
Yes.
What? He's the guy who's now. You once said that unless it's a commercial street.
Look, it's commercial districts,
It's a double yellow line.
So what's the definition of a
He's the
district?
chair, he's the head of the police
Let me get a ruling on that.
Okay.
Let me get a ruling. I'll tell you this, do I really write a lot of U-turns on CB7? No, it's not one of the big things that we do.
Yeah.
But, let me get a ruling, because that's residential, and DTL says commercial. U-turns are illegal in commercial areas, so let me get a ruling on that, and I'll get back.
Which raises the question of whether we want to encourage U-turns there.
Well, what does that have to
Probably
do
not,
with U-turns?
Because the reason that she wants,
turn left on
no parking is so that cars can turn left and have access on 63rd.
I heard somebody say double yellow line, that's meaningless, because you can have a double yellow line in a residential area, and you can make a U-turn over it.
I don't get it practically.
So let me look into that, and I'll get you guys an answer, I don't know.
Oh, okay. But, yeah, it'd have to be like a. And it would cause more traffic. I mean, I think, so, yeah, to Rich's point then, we wanna do this on the north side as well, cause that's the only place that they can turn left and, get
So
into
what
the-
is the current situation on the south side of 63rd between Central Park West and Broadway? What is the?
It looked the same, there's some no standing zone.
It's no standing
7 to
during.
7.
I take your word for it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's scaffolding
Yeah.
on the corner. There's a no standing anytime, and then there's a no parking Monday to Friday, 8 to 6.
Right.
So we want the no parking to become no standing.
Just in front of the entrance.
Right, for one spot, that's, yeah.
And then further down is a truck loading zone. Where is the actual door? How far?
Around 175 feet west of Central Park West. Between Broadway and
Third
Central Park West.
or more down the block.
It's hard to see because there's
It's
scaffolding.
pretty far down
I
the
don't
picture.
think we're
Plus that street is a
I think given that
decision
there's
on
the Y on the north side and there's a lot of activity there.
Yeah.
There's also a huge apartment building on the north side behind the Y.
And our entrance is directly across from the Y entrance.
Right. Any comments, or I'll call the question on
Let's
the,
call the question.
one?
Yeah.
It sounds like you might need more information to do this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to abstain, in spirit, I support it, but I'm going to abstain because I don't think we have enough information about that
What do
actual
you-
block
what do
and
you
what it
need,
looks
Matt?
like. I mean, there, from what we're seeing in Google Maps, there's a lot of scaffolding, it's hard for me to actually tell where the current thing exists. There's some estimates of how far down the block the car, like, the actual visual isn't clear.
One spot off the corner so that cars can make turns.
It'll pass
Then
us
it's
around.
a parking
I just
from
wanna
the-
be able to get.
Or we
it
could
to
try to
go.
plug it in, I don't know.
So like, I can't tell I from feel this like where we the have entrance the is same or amount of something. information about this Yeah. street as we had about 62nd. I don't understand, actually.
There's an entrance to the building and the one
There's
is
a scaffolding
one
on this side.
spot.
That's
the-
It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter where along the street it is, it's the one spot in front of the entrance.
I think part of our consideration needs to be,
Yeah. I'm also wondering if you're going north on Central Park West, you turn left on 63rd, but the entrance is on the south side of 63rd.
On the left side, yeah.
Right, so you turn left on but it's one way, never mind,
One way.
never mind, Yeah, never mind.
One way,
Yep.
and to go about a third of the way down to Broadway, there's the Y entrance on the right, and our entrance is on the left.
Would it be a horrible thing if the access to the curb were a little bit of a distance from the entrance? Cause
Why?
then you could marry it up with the existing no standing.
You could.
Instead of having a gap.
And perhaps that's where the fire hydrant is too.
That's only at the corner though, it's pretty far down.
It's pretty far.
Yeah.
But I'm
Across the
saying,
corner,
as
there's
opposed to
no
trying to
sense
wrestle
in
with,
that.
are we interfering with a truck loading zone, which I can't tell from right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's the,
It's not really a truck loading zone.
well, what is it?
It used to be no parking 8 to 6 Monday to Friday, and because we have so many contractors in our building and in some of the local buildings around the area, they now let them park there legally.
Well, the
But
sign definitely
it's
says
not a
truck
loading
loading zone.
It's like.
And what, does it give more detail?
Monday to Friday, 7 to 7.
Is there frequent double parking on 63rd Street?
Absolutely.
Because then that's blocking the M10 bus as well.
Both of them, yes. On
Oh, it's also a
62nd and
bus
63rd.
street.
It's a
Yes,
bus
it is.
street,
It's a bus
though,
street.
then for
And
sure.
So-
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the culture school is,
That's right.
So one other thing we have to consider is getting this through full board. And we're gonna be going with 3 resolutions,
Yeah.
which is gonna get sloppy. And I wonder if we're better off just doing them all together. And we're gonna
Well, why
have,
don't we adopt them and then we can decide later whether I'll bundle them when I present it.
Yeah.
That's something that we
Yeah.
could do.
right.
We're gonna need, photographs of the actual, signs that govern the current parking to get this
We'll get
through the,
you
right.
all
And the entrances,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you want a layout of the street with every concept?
That would help.
Anything
Yeah,
that-
that'd be
As much as
great.
possible.
Yeah, as much as possible, now we can edit
I mean,
it.
just so you understand, this committee is sympathetic, but there are people on board who won't be, so that's what we're trying to just,
So with those caveats, we can.
With those caveats.
who's your email address?
Sure, sure, okay. Let's just vote and then I'll give you my email. All those in favor of the removal of one, to have a one spot, no standing zone on the north entrance on 63rd Street?
With the caveats you've described.
With the, well, all the caveats, okay?
With the caveats.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
similar.
No one, that's the whole committee, all non-committee members. All those in favor, 1, all those opposed, 2, that's maybe some indication what the, how it's gonna go with the
Yeah.
fourth one.
I was very much in
If
favor
certain
of the one on
caveats are
Central Park West, but those 3 entrances all connect in that building.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what entrance you go in.
But her point is, if you're coming north from from
So
Midtown.
your car has to go around the block, or what?
It's actually a little bit more than
Yeah,
your viewing.
I'm familiar with building.
It's actually not true, if you think about it. If you're going north and you have to make the left at 63rd Street, you can't go around the block because they're both one way in the same direction.
Actually, you have to go up to 68th Street,
You
and
know,
then turn
and
and come back out and around.
Or you go over to Broadway and go.
I can only speak for
but-
myself, because it's
yeah.
the exact point that I was making
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
and asking for standards. I'm certainly
Okay,
empathetic to
my
solution,
email.
but this is what I think will end up happening, and each one will sound great, but I can tell you from people that are not on the committee, who are gonna be voting, it sounds egregious, it doesn't sound like it's well thought out, it sounds like we make kind of a sympathetic case, it will be passed. That's just, I haven't argued, I haven't said anything, I just gave a vote, but if you wanna hear a thought, that's my thought.
Yeah, I have some questions.
Lisa?
I have a question about the next agenda item.
Oh, we're not up to that.
What?
We're not up to that.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for your time and your hearing.
Yes, yes, do you have a report, Inspector? Where is he?
He's outside.
Oh, he went outside. What?
Howard,
Oh, sure.
do you have any other printouts? Yeah, I don't have.
Printouts?
Of like the letters that you don't have and
Oh.
everything.
I mean, I have notes on it, I was meaning to look at it. Oh.
Oh, they're there? Okay.
I was like, I tend to mark them up.
Oh.
Okay, next agenda item is the,
He doesn't have another agenda. I actually want the letters of the agenda.
okay, yes, well, we're gonna have it. Why don't we have the speaker, and then you'll have a minute, and then we'll go back to our regularly scheduled agenda.
Alright, I'll stay here, is this alright?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, hi everybody, my name is Dan Sarasi, I'm the president of Urban Cycling Solutions. We're a consulting practice that deals with multimodal transportation planning, small-scale tactical interventions for complete streets and connections to transit. So thank you for giving me a couple minutes to speak. What I wanted to talk about today is a really exciting initiative we've been working on with the New York State Department of Health and the New York State Bicycling Coalition for the last year. We have received funding from the Department of Health to provide free complete streets trainings to communities all over New York State. And these trainings are full-day trainings. They cover everything from the nuts and bolts of different types of infrastructure that you have in your toolkit when you're assessing the street, to policy measures, implementation mandates, data collection, the whole suite of tools that we have at our disposal when you're thinking about complete streets. This is something that I'd like to inform you about and offer to the full board. This particular training was designed specifically for municipal planning boards, for chambers of commerce, elected officials. So we're really trying to get into the weeds and try to generate an understanding of these different concepts. Again, this is a completely free training. It includes a walk audit. So if you were to do that here in the Upper West Side, we'd identify some of those top 10 intersections, and we take a walk and do an assessment of them in real time with community board members, elected officials, business owners, and get different perspectives on how people treat different intersections in that space. One last thing I'll say about this training, you know, as many of you can attest, a lot of these things, whether we're talking about bicycling or walking or playing with parking, I'm not going to say one way or another what we're doing with it, but these can be divisive issues. So we approach this training as an economic development training. It's not about creating a more bicycle-friendly community. It is about creating a more economically vibrant environment, a safer environment where people want to live, walk, work, and play. There's a lot of tools that go along with that. Some are bike lanes, some are curb extensions, some are bump outs, and the list goes on. But that's how we approach the training. We focus on economic development, we focus on public health outcomes, we focus on safety, and we look at things like bicycling and walking as tools to get us there. So again, I wanted to inform you all about this training. If it's something that you're interested in with the full board, again, it is completely free. This is not a big deal. Just email me, or you can contact Lisa, and we'll set something up and try to schedule something soon. Any questions or anything like that?
Yeah, if we did it, like, do we have to provide a space for it?
So the only things that you need to do are provide a space, and it's geared toward planning boards. So I would hope that we have a built-in audience with the community board, maybe some key members of the community. If there's any local elected officials, we'd like to have them as well. It's not meant for the general public, just because if you are inviting electeds and planning board members, it's kind of hard to be candid.
Yeah.
So, you know, we want to have lots of candid discussion. We build in visioning workshops. We have a SWOT exercise we build in. So it's a really great opportunity to convene stakeholders, educate stakeholders, and start to map out next steps for street safety and placemaking. Any other questions?
Two quick things. You mentioned the government funding, so you're part of New York State doing this?
So it's funded,
what other private sector partners you're working with, and if so, could you identify them?
So there are no private sector entities. I mean, we are working with the New York Bicycling Coalition, but it's a 501c3, and yeah, otherwise it's funding from the Department of Health. Original funding to develop the course came from NYSERDA, and that's all she wrote.
Okay, and then secondly, the data, you mentioned the data. How do you plan to either use that or distribute it? Who owns it, and how's it going to be distributed?
So the course was designed with New York State specific data. So you know, a lot of times when you have these complete street workshops, you have data from like Portland or California, and it's not really applicable. So we took data directly from New York State DOT, from the Governor's Traffic Safety Commission, traffic statistics. It's all available online. It's all New York State. All of our case studies are New York State.
And what's the website? Is there a website?
So there's no website for the actual training. What I can do is I can distribute a flyer about the course. I also have some information on my website about it. The actual training curriculum is like a 150 slide presentation, so I can't really circulate that.
Understood. Just trying to figure out, I think the data is something we've talked about as a committee for a long time, about how that data is used and stored.
And if you did want to do a training here, there is some measure of tailoring. So if there are specific intersections you'd like to use as examples during the training, if there are specific policies you want to break down and analyze, we build that into the course.
Dan, how long does it take?
So the training, it's flexible. It depends on how much you want to accomplish. The full training usually runs from 9:30 to 3:30, and that's fully loaded with a walk audit, with the visioning, the SWOT exercise. If you wanna do a streamlined version where it's just some focused discussion, the walk audit, and general overview of information, we can shorten it a bit.
You can do it on a weekend, Dave?
We could.
Doug?
I'm following you, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the word candid. And could you explain, you're in a public meeting right now in a
Sure.
city office with, you know,
And
the
it's live
concept of
streamed.
not, what's that?
And we're streaming live.
And we're streaming live.
Sure.
The idea of not welcoming members of the public, can
So,
you explain what you mean by that? Because I have a real problem with that.
The reason for that is we can only accommodate so many people in the training, especially because we have a walk audit. You can't have 50 people doing a walk audit effectively. So the training was designed originally because planning boards are required to have a certain number of education credits per year from the Department of State. And there are communities where there are elected officials who come to these trainings but are uncomfortable sharing their thoughts if members of the public are present. We don't preclude members of the public from coming, but when it comes to numbers and who we accommodate, you know, we are trying to focus on board members, elected officials, Chamber of Commerce members, and then as space allows, allowing in the general public. There's nothing secret, and all of the results are yours to publish.
Appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, all of the results are yours to publish.
Therein lies the rub.
So
Never want something secret.
If we do any visioning, if we do any SWOT, that data is yours to disseminate to the public. It's just, we've got numbers that we can fit in the training, and, you know, we accommodate who we can.
Thank you.
Yes?
Can you just repeat your name and intro for some of us who didn't hear it?
Sure.
Yeah.
My name is Dan Sarasi. I'm the president of Urban Cycling Solutions. We're a small consulting company that does a lot of complete streets work. I actually wrote the National Guide on Bicycle and Transit Integration, so that's kind of a niche area that we deal in. And I love this work, so if I can be of assistance, if we can get a training here in the Upper West Side, I would love to join.
You wanna give people your contact information in case they want to sign up, or?
Sure, I can distribute that afterward.
But it's not like, you can't sign up for individual.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
you have to
for,
sign up for one
so
page,
the,
then.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
You
training
have
would
to,
be
like,
for
organize
the
it.
community board and whomever you're inviting from
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
So,
I think we should do it.
I think we should do it too. I mean,
Be
it's
interested
an
in it.
organizational. with
I should
some
say,
logistical
we have enough funding to offer 8 trainings per year. Right now, there are 3 spoken for, so if you want one, let's chat sooner than
Does
later.
someone want to take the responsibility for reaching out to the other committee members or even CB7 members and seeing if we have a critical mass that would warrant doing
I
that?
think that.
I think we should discuss this at the hearing, actually.
Yeah, or, yeah.
Okay.
So,
I
limit
don't
your
know if
number,
everybody's
how many people?
interested.
So
We just sent
we-
out an email
Yeah.
asking who's interested, but we could discuss it.
And also we get basic homework done.
So our optimal training size is 15 to 30 at the max. So 15 to 25 is our
Do you
ideal
want
size.
Even
to
if you invite the
coordinate
whole
with
board, then
Elizabeth
that's
and
fine.
get her the
Yeah.
logistical information if we come up with a
Yeah.
group of, let's say, 20 who want to go ahead with this, what we do?
Sure.
I can connect her.
Yeah, and just
Okay.
trying to get a better sense of
I
it.
get one spot
That
though.
would be helpful.
But, yeah.
That's here, yeah.
We're suggesting that our steering committee, which is all the chairs of all the committees of the board.
Plus the executive.
Plus the executive, committee, available by any chance? It's in the evening.
Tuesday. Let me get back to you.
Okay.
I have a brief video on my website about it, so all of those.
Thank you. Sir, you have something?
Changes that were going to occur at the 79th Street roundabout and how the heavy automobile traffic around it is a problem no matter what seems to be going forward. I tried to make a comment at another full board meeting, but I was interrupted after about 30 seconds. So I thought if I could get a minute here, that would be enough. It's one obvious reason why there's such heavy traffic, of course, at the 79th Street roundabout is you can get on the West Side Highway northbound, southbound, you can get off the West Side Highway northbound, southbound, all at 79. At 72nd Street, you can get on the West Side Highway northbound and that's it. You used to be able to get off the West Side Highway northbound there as well. You also used to be able to get on the West Side Highway southbound there. If one of those 2 passageways was restored, it would reduce the traffic flow at 79th. If both were restored, it would reduce it even further. So I'm just suggesting that be one of the alternatives people look at as they try to cope with whatever the problems are at 79.
Point of information, Andrew, who is longer, dealt with these issues much longer than I have, don't we have a resolution on this, do we?
Not on restoring, a 72nd Street southbound entrance, that's
I know when they
because
built
of work that's
Riverside
been done, you
Boulevard,
couldn't
that
have
whole
that
thing got
done.
reconfigured.
Yeah, and of course,
And
north
that was
of,
very
north of
controversial.
59th Street, it's known as the Henry Hudson Parkway.
But can you speak to, I mean,
Okay,
just so
well-
he understands the logistics of why that would be difficult?
There's been a lot of building and parkland and bike trails and walking trails, south of there, below the highway. I don't know how you would, I guess Colleen could respond to this, but I don't know how you would restore the southbound entrance there. Northbound is there, obviously.
Andrew, they've also eliminated some of the superstructure that was.
That's right, they have.
Well, so even forgetting the southbound entrance, if you restore the northbound exit, even that would help 79th Street. And a lot of people felt that that was just done as a gift to the then principal at the area, now President Trump, you know, and it was very controversial, and it seems to me that that could be restored.
I think the reason that you have 79th and 96th is because those are streets that actually go through to the east side. You know, they lead to transverses, 72nd does not. That's why those are more important, technically.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is being able to get off at 72nd northbound would reduce, you might still have a problem with heavy traffic at the 79th Street roundabout, but it wouldn't be as bad. So that's my suggestion.
Okay, we'll look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5, the pedestrian turn warning system. Is someone here to present on that? No?
I'll jump in, I was not supposed to present on it, but I will.
Okay.
I was here for the session,
Can you come around?
Come around so I can hear you. Thanks.
So,
Who are you?
I'm Deborah Greilsheimer. I live on 79th between, my building is on West End, but it goes back towards Broadway, so my apartment is between Broadway and West End. There is a trial on a caution buses turning announcement on the buses. The bus does not turn. I'm sure people have problems with this who live places where it actually does turn, but the bus doesn't turn on 79th and Broadway or 79th and West End. But I understand, and I don't know whether this is rumor or fact, that it is connected to a 40-degree turn in the steering wheel. And so it picks up when the bus, pulls out sharply from a bus stop or is going around a Con Ed pole or anything else. It seems to be connected to the steering wheel regardless of whether the engine is engaged. So you get the caution buses turning while the bus is stopped at the traffic light. The traffic light then changes and there's no announcement. But it's particularly it's not just that it's annoying, it's actually really dangerous because if a bus is at an intersection and it says caution buses turning, everybody around it, if it works at all, acts as though the bus is turning. And you expect the bus to turn, not simply to pull out and go straight. And so there are multiple problems with this, right? One, it's misleading and hazardous, right? Because you expect when the bus is sitting in the right lane at the intersection and it says bus is turning, it's gonna turn right, not pull out to the left and go straight. So it's dangerous for people around it. It covers all, it just enormously adds to the noise, and we have the hearing impaired crosswalk signals. So it makes it hard to hear those. I would imagine, I have proper vision, but that if you don't have vision, the incorrect announcements are that much more hazardous. It's
I think
also.
it's too sensitive as to the angle the bus is turning.
Yeah.
You know.
So there are some, and it's also vastly too loud. I live on the 9th floor and have double pane windows, and it actually wakes me up at night.
Oh, wow.
So the volume
You've
on
seen the
it-
letter from Rob Marino, I assume?
I have not.
He is saying that they are turning down the volume on that,
Okay.
and are looking at the entire.
So I would love to see the letter.
Sure.
So
Sure.
the far and away, the two easy solutions are to change the angle that activates it, so that, I mean, it's a grid city, so something closer to 90 degrees, you know,
Yeah.
80 degrees, right, not 40 degrees. The volume should also be reduced. They should consider, somehow connecting it as well to the engine, so that it doesn't go off when the bus is not actually moving.
Well, I have a problem with just, or my building, or in my neighborhood, or even if you read that there was an article in an online news, ragtime, last night, a lot of annoying things, but I've sent many letters here about the noise. You're on the 9th floor, I have letters here, people on the 11th floor. This thing runs 24/7. I'm on 72nd Street.
Don't knock 24/7 bus service, please.
I
That's
just
a
the
hard,
announcements that we're knocking.
Yeah, exactly.
We get the Crosstown West
No.
72nd, we get the 5th, which doesn't turn, we get the Crosstown 57th, and we get all the out-of-service ones that's hooking around Riverside and turning right around my
And we
apartment.
get the rotunda turn as well.
But to me, this is just a second
on
horn.
79.
This is just a second horn on the bus.
It,
The only thing that's
obviously, it
good-
has to be loud enough for those who are visually
But it-
impaired to hear it, but it is too loud. We've got that for sure.
So
what this
yeah.
letter says is that it automatically adjusts to be 3 to 5 decibels above the ambient noise level.
Okay, so it's gonna be ineffective. I also sent a letter, I
But
did
the
some
noise of the bus
research
is
in New
part of the
Jersey.
ambient
New
noise.
Jersey has their school buses have a sensory that's just been added. They had an Abigail law that just passed. It's a sensory. I called up the company too. They can put 10 sensor devices around each bus. That would alert the driver. It is the driver that's going to stop all the accidents, not a bicycle person riding a bike, running a red light or making a bad turn. That's going to stop the accident. So if the driver knows, he's gonna be able to stop it.
Some of the buses have sensors now. Got the pedestrian sensors, I've seen them.
Yeah, some, but
There's
not
also-
most.
It's the least of the problems, but it also implies, because they blast it when they turn, right, the pedestrians crossing there at that point have the light, right? The pedestrians have the right of way, not the bus. So even putting the sensor that it goes off when like there's a pedestrian in front of the bus and it's trying to turn, well, the pedestrians will be in front of the bus because our lights are
Right.
set up that way.
Like, why does the bus even need to warn people? It should just stop and wait for people to get out of the way.
Exactly.
Do you know why it is
So
being put on
there-
the buses, anyone?
I think it was.
There's somebody back there.
Heritage, safety issue,
Yeah.
among other things, but.
That's what it is.
But
I've heard many different, issues
Well, no,
about
the problem is it's designed for the blind, those buses have enormous blind spots, especially the articulated buses.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, a person who's visually impaired may not appreciate that the bus
Walk out
is
into the
about to move against them. And the problem is that even at 40 degrees, the thing activates when it goes in and out of the bus stop. I hear it too, by the way. I'm on the 3rd floor in the back and I hear it in the
Yeah,
alleyway.
but why would, I mean, just to question this, if it's pulling out of a bus stop, it's pulling into a lane of traffic. So is the blind person just randomly
I'm
standing in
saying,
the
like,
middle of
if
the street,
if the blind
like in the
person
middle of
is,
traffic?
like, say that there's a bus turning and now the person is in the bus's blind spot and the person is visually impaired and doesn't realize there's a bus
No, no, but she's asking.
No, I'm saying-
When it leaves the
I
curb.
Right, that's an issue of the sensitivity
that's what
of
I'm
it.
saying.
That's
Yeah.
too
So,
sensitive.
so
It's sensitive,
again,
but
like it
but you
seems like
can't
the
design a system,
correction.
I'm pretty sure you can't design a system that way because, the M96 bus turns right onto Broadway, left onto 97, left onto West End Avenue, and left
onto
onto.
97.
Right.
So
But
having
all-
it not activated when the bus turns left.
No, no, no,
out
I'm not
of
saying
the-
left
doesn't
or
work.
right, I'm saying the turn, what
Maybe
it
it should be a
considers
90
a
degree
turn,
Yeah, it should be
should
very
be
close to that.
close to 90 degrees.
Not when you pull out from a curb to the traffic.
Because intersections,
I'm not smart enough to know if that
Okay.
works, but I understand your point.
right, so that you're actually getting turns and not lane shifts.
Well,
That's my proposal.
I'm gonna be with the head of buses on Thursday, I will bring this all up.
While we're talking about volumes, obviously, kneeling buses often make quite a bit of noise. Have we ever discussed that? The sound that the bus makes when it kneels? Sometimes it seems excessive to me. Now, and I don't understand the particular hazard of the bus, and make sure there's some reason for it, but,
When
yeah,
it
I mean,
puts out
especially if
the,
you're at the front of the bus and
puts
it.
out the ramp,
Absolutely
it
right,
makes the
and
sound too, it
actually,
beeps.
I have a recording of that too, that I brought.
Right,
All
if
of a
they're
sudden,
lowering
the bus
decibels,
will
maybe that's
stop,
another.
The doors will open and you hear this huge loud whistle.
Yeah.
Sometimes a platform comes out, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it just opens, the whistle goes off again, and then it closes and then
Well-
takes
So,
off.
and
I'm sorry, I just wanted, my point, it makes more sense to me if a platform is opening for a wheelchair-bound person. That's a lot of, you need to have attention, but I'm talking about just lowering,
Yeah.
and it's this
Actually,
loud
we're
beep 24 hours a day.
pretty much doing we have, low floor buses on almost everywhere now, so the kneeling will not happen much anymore. All of the new buses are low floor buses, no need to kneel.
Interesting.
So they've
Sorry.
also added, and it seems to be trial basis, cause it's again, it's on a random sampling of buses, but it wakes me up at night, and so it's illegal, like it's in violation of the noise code, unnecessary, right? If you have, like, what is the purpose of this, right? There are signs that say what the buses are. If it's for the people on the bus who need to know where they are, then it should be done while the door is closed before the doors open. And where I live, which is 79th and West End, there are no ticket vending machines there because it's the penultimate stop. So if you think you're doing it for customers, like, why are you
Well,
playing
isn't
it
it for
if there are no
people that aren't sight, that-
potential?
Yeah, it's for
It's
visually
for the blind.
impaired.
But-
It's for the blind to know what bus is approaching the stop.
But there's no, you can't get on there. It's not it's only a disembarkment stop.
Oh, I see. It's dead end.
That's what
yeah,
I,
yeah.
so it's
Why you were saying the door.
So like,
The bus doesn't
if
know
you-
it's a dead end though.
and couldn't you instead, well, first of all, you could ask the driver and not bother the entire neighborhood, but even if you wanted something that didn't involve the driver, there are push button options rather than every single bus that goes by making announcements.
I guess what we're saying, and from my building too, is the quality of life has deteriorated
It's
considerably.
enormously.
And instead of the MTA improving things, getting better, I put up flyers out there and then people writing in, get over it, we're a noisy city. With that attitude is, well, we just keep making it worse and worse and worse instead of making things better. Let's just shut up, be quiet and get used to it, and then it just starts piling
I
up
will,
on you.
I will
the
absolutely
noise.
impart your
actually-
feelings to the bus division.
They compete against each other, and so therefore they escalate because the buses are going, so they wanna put this on all buses. At
Actually, I'll
79th
have them
and-
come and do a ride-through with us, and they.
That would be.
He's
And
on
I
the
mean,
board of the MTA.
I was just gonna
And
say,
listen.
I'm happy to volunteer my apartment
Yeah.
if they'd like to.
The mine is ground
see.
zero.
There seems to be a lot of indifference to noise pollution. I don't know why. This is noise pollution that affects everyone. And, you know, ideally, we should find a less polluting way to deal with those
Yeah.
problems.
I'm told it's going to get worse when the old ones now become new buses.
Well, what I was starting to say is that you're gonna have 4 buses at that intersection. If they are announcing their stops, announcing when they pull in, right?
And
All
turning.
4, they're all announcing at the same time, and it just just spirals.
Could I just say, I think we fully understand and appreciate the issue. I think the best solution is that Andrew is on the MTA board, and if anyone can make change, it's Andrew. I don't know that there's any reason for us to pass a resolution of just having Andrew.
I'll have
And I don't know that, I think we've,
Sometimes I wake up at night waiting to listen for the bus to come.
Yeah.
And it gets really obsessive.
Do you have a rider?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a rider?
You know, people used to fall asleep to the Third Avenue out.
One of the things that you could
That's
bring
what
up
they fell asleep to.
is whether these have to be, some of these things could be suspended overnight. Now, the safety ones, you know, this is a committee that is very dedicated to a number of safety initiatives, and rightly so. So the ones that have to do with the visually impaired, modulating the volume certainly sounds like the right thing to do, and whatever other creative ideas that you and the bus division guy can come up with. But I wanna be a little bit careful in terms of just abandoning safety issues altogether, but trying to find a better balance and a better volume.
Having the bus make that announcement when it's pulling it from a stop out into a lane of traffic is ridiculous.
It does seem to me, yes, I agree with that. I also think that making the announcements at 2 o'clock in the morning may be overkill as well, if there's some easy way to flip it off after midnight, say, or something like that. So by all means, I think Rich is right, I think, and we thank Andrew for offering to have this conversation. And I think that's all we can do tonight, all I would recommend that we do tonight, and then hear back what it is that you're able to come up with.
Not be a bad neighbor.
In addition, I think we should at least recognize, or it was mentioned that there was a DOT letter, I guess in response to your letter.
Yeah.
It's dated today, so like I was just reading through it here. It does note on the second page that it doesn't say we will do this, it just says determined it is possible. But says we determined.
And by the way, I'm the person that it was in response to.
Yeah, when you introduced yourself
Yeah.
again, I said, oh, that's in response to you, but on the second page, third full paragraph, it says we determined that it is possible to lower the volume setting by 15%, which will keep the volume of the audio announcement between 2 to 3 decibels, which, Richard was referring to before. It also noted we determined that we can safely adjust the turn angle setting to better prevent an announcement from being made when the bus is pulling in or out of a bus stop.
It's not from DOT. It's from
oh,
transit.
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Well, and
transit.
clearly they
Yeah.
put a lot of
But
work into this.
there
This
are-
is a very detailed personal response, which is encouraging.
But they're not the people woken up in the middle of the night.
Yes.
It's,
Yeah.
The noise pollution is like an externality, it's not on their radar screen.
Yeah, well, and I think Mark's right, and I would imagine, I would imagine that this entire system wasn't put in place until there were enough incidents that warranted.
Yeah, right.
I'd be surprised if they haven't gotten enough complaints from other neighbors.
Yeah.
I definitely think.
I think we have our marching steps, or Andrew has.
Okay, thank you, we're very sympathetic. Follow up on the October 29th Transportation Forum. We adopted a resolution back in April, and it will be going to the full board in December, and I was wondering, I would like to have a discussion regarding it. I don't have printouts, it's calling on basically for the city to look at the highest and best use for curbside space, to discontinue all the free parking and consider charge parking, residential parking permits, meters capable of surge pricing, places to store garbage. It goes on and on and on. It's basically calling on the city to figure out the best possible, the optimal use for
Is this a resolution you're referring to?
Yes, it was adopted in April.
By the committee.
By the committee,
By the committee, I never, yeah, it's
And
helpful.
even though,
Well,
I was a little quick, fast on this.
Yeah.
In April, we adopted this resolution. Roberta, I think, who's not here, wisely suggested we do a little homework before we present it to the full board. That homework became the forum we had, which we had last month, and now, that we've done that, this resolution will be going to the full board, and I just think we should discuss it among the committee first and then with the community, about, any issues, concerns, criticisms, ideas you have regarding this resolution.
Could you clarify the free parking part?
Okay, do you want me to read it?
Just read it.
It'll
Yes,
take
please.
us.
And we shortened it, right?
Yes, this is the final resolution that was adopted. The following facts, the following facts were taken into consideration. This will take about 90 seconds to read. A congestion pricing plan was passed by New York State, which will impose fees on cars that travel south of 60th Street. This may increase congestion of non-residents looking to park on streets north of 60th Street within the CB7 in order to avoid driving into the congestion zone. That's one. Two, city-owned street space next to curbs is a precious commodity. This huge amount of city-owned land should be used to create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Three, free parking for privately owned cars strongly encourages private car use over mass public transit, thereby creating traffic congestion, pollution, environmental degradation, as well as unsafe conditions for pedestrians, cyclists, and other users of the street. It exacerbates economic inequality by directing limited city resources to private car owners, and this is the resolution. Therefore, be it resolved that CB7 Manhattan requests that the city discontinue the policy of providing free parking for private cars and consider more productive and equitable uses of curbside space, including but not limited to paid residential parking permits, meters capable of surge pricing, and the best practices of other major cities. It passed unanimously.
Passed. You
Just
say unanimously, I think I
asking us to
abstained
end
on
free
it, but.
parking.
I must have abstained.
It's asking us to consider the highest and best use. Yes,
No,
yes.
but it
Yes,
it
yeah.
definitely says we're
Right.
asking.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
And this would be a policy that the city would adopt, they wouldn't just adopt it for Community District 7, correct?
Should though.
No,
Yeah.
well, they could. They
They
could.
could.
They
You
could.
can't do it citywide.
And
It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, we're not here to talk about what should be done in Queens. We're here to be talk about CB7.
Cause it's specifically about
Yeah.
the fact that
Yes.
congestion pricing might
There is a
lead to
big concern.
more-
Congestion pricing is coming. When, I'm not sure, but it's coming. And it is definitely going to have an effect. I don't know what the effect will be, but I think I can.
January of 2021.
Yeah, it's right.
Well,
That's
don't
when
hold
it's
your
coming.
breath.
At 61st Street.
Yeah, and so it might have an effect specifically on our neighborhoods.
Yes.
It's obvious, it's definitely gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why
What
it's
the
not
effect is, I'm
citywide,
not
it's,
sure.
it's.
Ed
it's
Pinkar, the borough commissioner, agreed with my statement, which is, it is highly unlikely that people will drive from far away into an already very congested Upper East or Upper West Side, gamble on getting a parking space, or pay a really high rate for a garage and get on an already overcrowded subway or bus. That
Oh,
is-
I agree completely. The issue is with the finite amount of parking, will there be people who just inadvertently decide, well, I'm going to the in the low 50s, maybe I should look in this area because it'll be free. And if that's just at the margin, traffic is
Good luck with
affected at
that.
the margin. I don't know, is all I'm
But even if
saying.
they can't find a parking spot, then it's more people, circling.
But we're getting rid of free parking, but we're not saying what the alternative is gonna be, right?
No, we're saying to do this holistically. It's a resolution calling for the city to look at better uses
Analyze,
other than
study,
free
and-
parking.
Right,
I'll
so
read
it's
it
not,
out.
we're not dealing with.
It's not saying get rid of free parking.
residential,
Yep.
street
That's
parking.
just like one
I heard that
option.
as
Yeah,
saying
'cause
we're
I
calling
think
for
that
them to
is-
eliminate free
Absolutely.
parking.
Yeah.
Okay, I will read
the
it
last
again.
sentence
I
again.
heard that.
Read the
That's
last
how I read
sentence.
it.
Here is the resolution. Resolved, the Community Board of 7 Manhattan requests that the city discontinue the policy of providing free parking for private cars
Getting
and
rid of free
consider
parking.
more
There it is.
productive and equitable uses of curbside space.
That's called a
It's a
free-
combined thing, to get rid of the free parking and consider more productive uses, including but not limited to residential parking permits, meters capable of surge pricing, and the best practices of other major cities.
Maybe we get rid of the first half of the sentence and say that we're calling on, I'm thinking of the practicality of passing it at the full board, that we're
Yes.
calling on, DOT to analyze the
Yes.
way that our curbside is used currently.
And weigh a possible residential parking permit, trial.
Okay,
Or
let me,
other- or
let me,
other,
okay,
you know,
well, I
yeah.
think I could solve this issue. This is a resolution that passed the committee, but we could decide to amend it tonight.
Yeah.
We could decide to amend it so that, where it says that the community boards having requested that the city discontinue the policy of providing free parking for private cars, we could take that out. We could call on the city to look at the policy of providing free parking and consider, okay,
Yeah,
to
consider
study.
or explore.
Right,
Yeah.
well, consider is the word that's
Although,
used.
I'm just not sure we should negotiate against ourselves before, this is like sort of a knock against Obama, like.
I know,
he
but
would,
look at what happened
um,
last time, it created
But
such.
I think if full board is is maybe the moment where we pull back and say, oh, well, you know, we could consider whatever, but this makes a strong statement that we are really,
cat's out of the bag now.
that we consider free parking.
I'm not sure it's gonna pass again.
I don't think our committee
It's
would.
not up for a vote, it's passed,
It's
so
already
it's not up
passed.
for a vote.
I mean, what we learned at this
We
forum.
passed it in April.
What we learned at this forum is that there are many, far fewer spaces than people who are hunting for them. That there are a huge number of what are called externalities, of people searching for parking. There are a lot of arguably much better uses for the curbside space in a lot of places.
It's a vast minority of the population that actually owns cars and parks them on the street.
And a really vast minority that owns a car but drives to work in Midtown or downtown or
Right.
the boroughs, so
Yeah.
that's.
Totally, for sure.
It's a vast minority.
It's a small minority, I mean, it's clearly
It's
a
a
minority.
small, okay, I didn't, vast seems big to me.
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay, so this is a topic that I'm pretty familiar with, talking about it for the past 10 years. Number one, in our neighborhood alone, 20% of the cars that park on the street are from out of state.
Yeah.
And I think that just not only do we lose money because the cars aren't registered in New York, what happens is if you wanna drive into New York City, well, first of all, I think you can't do this citywide. You've gotta
We're
start.
not talking about citywide, we're talking about
We're
our
talking
district.
about New York City.
No,
We're talking about CB7,
CB7.
please keep the
CB7.
comments directed on this community.
CB7, I mean, the amount of money that resident parking would generate, not only because of a fee that is paid by the residents, but also imagine people coming and driving into the city, they have to now park in a parking lot, which is 18.25% tax, which also goes to the city. And I think we did a study that it's something, between 72nd and 79th, we would probably be able to generate between $2.5 and $3 million just in those kinds of fees, okay? And that's probably a low estimate.
Okay.
And I think that this conversation of there are better uses of the curb, I think developers can't, I mean, there will be sliver buildings going up on that.
No one's
curb, so,
proposing sliver buildings. Steve?
But just a couple thoughts, and this is really why I came, and I wanted to give you maybe a non-committee, sort of viewpoint as well. So, and first of why you would reconsider, I think the whole reason that you paused it is to get more community input.
Absolutely.
And if you just ignore that, it would be by definition that you would want to reconsider it simply based on that. So I think
Well,
there's a
that's why we're
real
discussing it
premise.
tonight.
Well, I think I'm just sort of candidly reacting to Ken's comment that you shouldn't do that. I think you really are why would you do the
No,
forum
he
if
didn't
you
say we
weren't gonna
shouldn't,
reconsider?
he said we should keep it as is, which is a
Okay, I thought that you were
legitimate
saying that we
position
should,
to have. No,
we
he
should
definitely is
go
not saying
against
we should
yourself,
not
because I would think you would wanna
He did
reconsider it.
definitely not say we should stop the
Okay,
conversation.
so I think there was a lot of feedback, and I would think that everyone, the committee or myself, if I was voting, would want to take into that. And what I heard and
We're all
continue to
agreeing on
hear, is that there is certainly a portion of people that are very concerned about parking. Whether it's a third, or whether it's half, or whether it's, I'm not even taking a right or wrong. And just as a background, I voted for every single bike lane, and I am a green person. But I also believe that there is a lot of passionate people on this, in the Upper West Side, that's all I'm gonna speak, who feel passionate about this, feel that there hasn't been enough research done, feel that maybe congestion pricing would, maybe it won't. I think there's a lot of stuff to be done, and I will say that if you take a position that says there should be that we wanna remove free parking, I think that'll be taken very, very strongly, that we're not listening to the community. I think it's a very strong overreach on the position. And if that is if there's people who feel that, but my understanding that this was more about parking, not about getting free parking. I would be very against something, if there is, let's look at it, let's do what community boards are supposed to do, let's look at the data, let's look at this. But I would be very against something that took that statement, and I would caution as a committee to make sure that even if you feel a certain way, to be sensitive to the fact that there's other people in the community that feel very strongly against that.
Well, most people that
the committee discussion,
I do think that we, I hear you saying that we should be listening to the community and taking into facts and all these things. I think that's what we've done since April. We've had a lot of discussions around this. We did have the forum, so I think we have done that. And I also wanna say that I heard the people who were very passionate about parking as well, but I also heard a lot of people who were very passionate about the need to, have fewer cars on our streets for both safety, for the environment, for, the better uses that it can be put to. And again, the fact that, in fact, there's only about 20 to 30% of the Upper West Siders who own cars, and the rest of us are, public transit users, we're walkers, and so to us, it's a big, it's an externality on us to be dealing with all the parking. So I think that we are listening to all sides.
But isn't that a case to do more research? You're
No, I mean, I think we've just been doing a lot
but you're
of
predicating
research.
it on saying that congestion pricing could do something. You don't know that, you would wanna do
Right,
that.
and that's why the resolution does not call for residential parking permits. It's calling on the DOT to do a study to see what could be an alternative.
My only against it is saying we're
have
calling
residential
for
parking
I believe I heard, and it was tough because you were reading it, that we are calling for whether I'm paraphrasing, the ending of free parking. That's what I heard. You are taking a position in here, and you are taking a position against what the other people said. That's what I'm saying.
Let me just tell you the procedure we're at. This has been adopted. You can make a motion to amend it if you want.
I'd like to make a motion to amend it.
And then now we're discussing that, okay?
Right, but I mean, let's move this forward, so I think.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Rich, Sarah and then Rich?
I think strategically,
Well, how is it
it
gonna
would
be
be
amended?
good, what I proposed was to eliminate that first clause and to say, we want them to analyze the current policy of free street parking and consider alternatives. I think that strategically for getting it past the board, for avoiding another huge showdown, for taking into consideration these kind of concerns, I just think it's
If you say
better.
consider alternatives,
And then
you have to
listen,
add something like if applicable or if necessary or something, otherwise you're sort of saying the very same thing as the first resolution did.
Well,
It's asking them to consider more productive and equitable uses of curbside space, including but not limited to. That's really open-ended.
yeah.
Any other comments from the committee?
Yeah.
Rich?
So I think by one, this issue is completely zero sum. There's a fixed amount of space, and any space that's where we change or call for the change of a policy is going to benefit some people and disadvantage others. And I think to the extent that we took this to the community, we did get a small number of very passionate people coming out and defending the current system because they benefit from it. And it's something that I think it's something I played with in my time on the board of pretty much any issue we have, you get a certain number of people from the community who are the ones most impacted who are passionate. And I think it's a question of how much do you weigh them versus and do they represent the majority or are they a very vocal minority? And that's something to take into consideration. The other, I have one more, I have one more comment, I'm not done. My last comment is I think if we were to come in and build a system from scratch, if we had a complete blank slate, absolutely no way that we would design this kooky system where we're giving out space to either the people who sit in their car idling for an hour waiting for the spot to become legal and then leave their car so that no other cars can park there, and then give out space to other people who just drive around in circles looking for the free parking, polluting the neighborhood, causing congestion, and risking crashes and injuring our community. So
Barbara and then Andrew.
I agree with Steve completely, and I want to tell you why. With him. That's true, right?
Yeah.
Good.
There's a few people
Because you agree, you
whose
call me
names I
anything you
don't
want.
Now, it sounds extreme, it's very, very extreme, and I don't think it's realistic, and I think you'll get killed for it. I think there are too many issues. The same way we were all supportive of that woman who came before the board tonight and asked for a no standing zone for a very particular reason, you're going to start having all kinds of people who come before you with similar kinds of reasons, and they will be right. Now, in other cities where this plan works beautifully, they have something called municipal garages, and parking is affordable.
And they're smaller cities.
When last week, well, a couple weeks ago, when you had your forum, thank you. wait, now I lost my train of thought.
Municipal garages.
Forum. I don't know, I lost my train of thought, but anyway, that's, I
It left
agree.
the station.
So,
Oh, well.
I'm sorry,
That's
Andrew.
okay, Doug.
So, I stipulate that this resolution did pass. I believe I abstained, not because I was necessarily for it or against it, but I felt that we had not done enough outreach to the community. I was at the parking forum. I thought it was helpful. I learned some things. I remember that the agenda item originally was in response to congestion pricing, which clearly is in our district, and I know there's going to be, I'm convinced there will be impact. And how are we gonna deal with that? So I think all these things are very important, but what ended up happening is we have a very long resolution, and if you remember, there was a very emotional reaction from some people in the community. It was on television, and a lot of people came, and the reason why we pulled the resolution from the full board was because it was very emotional. We needed to spend more time to really think about it. So I'm just not convinced, as in this static moment, that we've still done enough research, and I may fully support all this. I just feel like there is more reach. We have a very north side of our neighborhood, with the south side of our neighborhood, and I just would want more community buy-in. That's all.
How would you propose to get that?
You know.
We had a public forum that
we
was
did,
really
we
well
did, and I,
publicized.
no, and it was
that
helpful.
Was what when we decided, Roberta and I decided to pull the resolution, and we both agreed on it.
Yeah.
We decided we'll have a forum, and we discussed this, and everyone agreed that's what we should do, and we did
Sure.
it. So what now do you think, now you think that
Actually,
wasn't enough?
it would be a show of faith if you made some changes. If you said, I heard this and maybe, that would be what I would.
So that's the motion on the table.
I have a motion.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you
Elizabeth,
can,
what is
wait,
your
I just
motion?
wanna make a point.
You
You
meant
can
to
hear-
strike that first
Can
clause
I just
and
say
then
something?
let
the chair run the meeting.
You can hear all the points of view and say, I've thought about it and I've heard everyone and I still think the original
enough.
was right. That's why, that's
Fair
why we're
enough.
discussing it here, and okay.
Fair enough.
Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, so, this is a very long day for me, cause, at 8 a.m. this morning, I got a financial briefing on the MTA's fiscal situation. And, needless to say, there's gonna be tons of money thanks to congestion pricing for capital, but virtually nothing for the operating budget, which means that there are huge deficits. If we were to be convinced that we should eliminate all of this parking and even a third of those folks converted to mass transit, where would we get the money to operate the additional service from? We barely can afford what we have right now. So whatever we come up with has to be devoted to the operating budget for transit if you wanna make a difference in this neighborhood.
So add a lockbox clause.
Add a clause.
I mean, it's
that says the
desperate.
money-
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Friendly amendment, I
It's a
think,
friendly,
right?
yes, I think a friendly amendment.
So add this, remove clause, add that.
Well,
Well, we
say
have to vote
remove.
on the motion.
We have to, so the motion is, we're going to, that, I think we're
I
all
think
in
we can
agreement
just
with.
You have to
That
recognize
the
that's
money
an issue.
that is, the revenue generated should go to the MTAs. Do you want an operating budget? Okay, 100 cents on the dollar. I just wanna get the words exactly right. It's, right now, it's the resolution clause says, Community Boards of Manhattan requests that the city discontinue the policy of providing free parking. How about reconsider the policy of providing free parking? Or,
I just
How
think
about just
it's
consider parking as an issue?
Just consider.
Why free?
Why reconsider?
oh, consider, yeah, consider, right, you're
Consider
right,
the
you're right.
policy.
Consider,
Right.
we're reconsidering, they have to consider, right. Consider the policy, okay.
Michelle has hand
Okay, you've had your hand up a while. You have the
The
floor.
first thing is, like, I think you guys have gotta do a better job of reaching out to the community. Like, for instance, this meeting tonight, the email came today. You know, I'm not really, I'm just
Well,
getting.
it's been on the website all month.
Okay, most people don't, most people know that, and it, you know, that's one part.
I mean, it's not, yeah.
The other part is that I went to the forum, and I went with a very open mind. And I was very disappointed by the fact that the forum was composed mostly of one point of view. You as a board member of TA, an expert who was the former president of TA, there wasn't anybody talking about how cars could fit into the equation, how vehicle owners could work in a new environment, etc. And there also were very little ideas, this rough idea of like garbage corral and make, oh yeah, we can get public programming to put in the streets. there was not a lot of information at that meeting. And the idea of some kind of dynamic pricing, it wasn't backed up with any kind of data whatsoever. And the important point that everyone keeps missing, and Mr. Albert, just to address the transit issue, most of the people that own cars and park on the street on the Upper West Side are
Drive to
not
work.
commuting
I
in New York
said
City.
that.
They're using them on weekends, they're using them to go to do things out of New York. They're what was derisively at the forum called storage. So they're not driving, they're not the traffic problem. So I would urge you people to please, a moratorium on getting rid of parking spaces until you can see the impact of congestion pricing, and then put in residential parking. That's gonna eliminate most of the traffic. People will not be driving around.
We're not solving this tonight, we're asking the city to consider, and by the way, personal attacks are not welcome. I'm also a driver, I do wear a lot of hats.
It's not
and
a
that's
personal
irrelevant.
attack.
Well, it was
What's right and wrong is
It's not a
separate from
personal
what.
attack to point out that you're a board member of a policy group that is pro bike, and that on their webpage is very virulent anti-car. I mean, and it isn't all that into safety either.
Okay, but you didn't mention that, but,
So,
okay.
and just one other point, I'd love for you guys too to occasionally, whether it's talking about the safety of pedestrians, can't we have some kind of public service announcements anymore? Can't the city start to bring back cross at the green, not in between?
We've talked
look
about that.
both
I've actually
ways?
had meetings with the head of the education department
Yeah,
at
there
DOT
should be
requesting that,
education
so
as a
it
big
is
part
something
of
that we
all
have
of
talked
this
about.
if you really
and-
wanna reduce accidents.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is
sure.
transportation committee, and so this is our bailiwick to talk about curbside use here.
I think
Thank you.
also-
So if I could offer just a couple of thoughts, some of them are gonna be process, some of them will probably wander into substance. One thought on process is that I think it's smart to consider how this will play in front of a wider audience, first with our full board colleagues, and then of course, we saw that there was a very healthy audience the last time somebody thought this was going to be on an agenda. So we should anticipate that, and we should plan for that, and we should plan for that to be welcoming of those folks and be welcoming of all points of view. Most of that I'm talking to myself right now because that's gonna be on me, but I would welcome your help in that. In terms of a good government approach to this, it strikes me that the closer we get to asking in this resolution for study, and whatever that study yields, will go a long way towards solving the landlords and tenants kind of issue that we're at, that I heard at that forum. Because I don't know that we're ever, that folks, excuse me, I'm sorry, it's a new phone and I don't really know how to use it. Thank you.
Well, what a delightful ring.
Well, I got rid of the calypso, so now it's this, or maybe it's a lullaby, and that should be my cue, right? So, I don't think we shy away from this simply because we're gonna get a lot of flack. I think we amend this because it's a good thing to do. And I do think it's a good thing to do for a couple of reasons, one of which is that if we eventually get to the point where we as a board wanna say that curbside parking shouldn't be free for anybody anymore, I would love for us to have not just a forum where a lot of folks said one thing and I heard a lot of folks say another thing, and there wasn't a lot of meeting of the minds there. There were just, it's my turn to talk. I think we're gonna I think that's what's gonna be going forward. The wider audience we get, the more people are gonna say one thing or the other. But if there is data and analysis by experts, whoever those experts are, Colleen's now left us, so I'm twisting here a little bit. But if you do that process-wise and then set up, if that yields what you think it'll yield, which is that there is a problem to be solved with congestion pricing, there's also a societal value statement that needs to be made. You'll have data and you will have analysis to go with it, rather than a bunch of smart people around this table who are very well experienced exposing themselves to the possibility that we will make this statement without that backup, without that support. Final point, lots of times, and I don't mean this as a disrespect, I'm glad for it, lots of times DOT wants our input, both because we have relevant information from the grassroots, but also it doesn't hurt them that we have their back. So let them have your back this time.
Okay,
That's my
let me
final
just,
question.
Elizabeth, proposed a resolution, and I would like to fill in the words. Amendment to the resolution, I would like to fill in the words. Right now, it says, Community Board 7 Manhattan requests that the city discontinue the policy of providing free parking. I would say, I'm proposing, if this is your intent, the city assess, how's that for a word? Assess the policy
How
of
about
providing
certain
free
types of free
parking.
parking, because you don't wanna.
Wait,
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
I think assess is fair.
Okay,
Yeah.
assess, and then it just reads fine, the policy of providing free parking for cars, and continue the policy to assess the policy. I think that makes it much more palatable.
To consider if there are more productive.
Oh, I like that.
And
Consider if
consider
there's-
more productive.
Consider
and
if there
Right.
are.
If there are,
That's
yeah.
much better.
If
If there are.
Whether there are.
Consider
Whether
there
there,
are.
yeah, that's more grammatically correct.
Right, could I make a case for inserting the word analysis, so assess and analyze?
Yeah.
Because, well, the problem with that is, just like DOT always comes in here and makes a presentation, and they say, look, there's no traffic, yeah, there's no traffic at 4 o'clock in the morning. The
Okay,
point
we
is,
get the point.
Yeah.
We're
the point-
wordsmithing
the
now, so
point-
thank
So
you.
the point
assess,
is,
analyze,
you
and
need to
then-
know who's doing
and
the
whether
study.
there are more.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Elizabeth, just to flush it out, her amendment would change it to CB7 Manhattan requests that the city assess and analyze the policy of providing free parking for private cars and consider whether there are more productive and equitable uses of curbside space, including but not limited to blah, blah, blah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
This is real semantics, but to say conduct a study, get
Consider-
deeper than
let's keep it
analyze or.
simple.
Let's, yeah.
Simpler is always better.
Yeah, I think that sounds.
So let's
good.
vote on
Okay,
the
wait,
amendment.
I just, any more discussion? Yep.
I thought that a term that they used in the forum that was really captures that it's
No one knows what
it's
that word
poorly
means.
allocated now and that it needs rebalancing and that uses for like allowing people to access the curb that can't.
I'm sympathetic to that, but I think that's beyond what the sense I'm getting the committee is willing to go for right now. So it's Elizabeth's changes as interpreted by me.
First we have to vote
You're-
on
well,
the-
you proposed, you
I know,
proposed
but
amendment. We discussed it. Any further discussion among the committee on this this proposed wording change? Yep.
One final thing, it's not about the wording. It is, we all owe it to ourselves to do as much outreach as possible to get this to be well known. I'm asking for it and I'm gonna take it right between the eyes, but I want as many people in that room with as many different points of view to be heard so that we can, whatever it is that the will of the board is to do with this, that it really be representative to the extent that any of us can do that, so.
The problem with that is
Yeah.
they don't know.
What, for the agenda, I'm not gonna, I won't be at steering, but like, what is, are there major items that are gonna be on, this will be the big item, I'm assuming, at the full board meeting, or are there other, do we anticipate
Big
other
controversial items.
controversial things?
That's a fair question, I don't have the answer right now, but I'll find out tomorrow.
Anyone on committees that knows if there's anything coming down the pipe?
Well, that'll come up in steering, so
Okay,
if you're not, that'll let you know.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I can answer.
No, I'm just thinking meeting management is gonna be really important.
Yeah, so let me answer that, because the Fettner property on 96th Street will have its Euler hearing a week from tomorrow night. That's the one where it's the sale of city-owned property in part, and it's the old IRT substation plus the Salvation Army plus the NAACP former headquarters or offices. That will be, but the only real question on that is, do we agree to the sale, I think for $1, of that city-owned property to be part of this development, which would in turn create, I believe, 40% affordable housing, but the kicker is, a lot of them are micro units, so they're efficiencies.
That could be a.
So that
My
could,
thinking is like, is there anything we need to tighten up in the resolution before we leave tonight?
I think the resolution reads pretty well.
I think it's,
Can I suggest that Steve give his thoughts, cause he's a
You
good
just
voice
asked
from
me,
outside?
and I said I was gonna abstain, cause I just wanted to hear more, but I will compliment the committee that you guys made an adjustment, cause I think it'll show a very good faith effort that you had this big forum, and you listened and you made an adjustment, and to me, that shows, I think that was important and a very good gesture, and it speaks a lot to the committee. I still wanna sort of absorb it, so I'm not gonna vote for it, I'm just gonna abstain, but I think it's a very positive thing to do. I get a lot of feedback
We're
from
just
people asking
voting
me
on the
what's going on,
amendment.
that's why.
Right
I
now,
wanted
we're
to
just
come
voting
in.
on the amendment.
We're just voting on the amendment. And again, for the third and final time, it's gonna read, request that the city assess and analyze the policy of providing free parking for private cars and consider whether there are more productive and equitable uses of curbside space. You got the point. Okay, all those in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Anyone opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, non-committee members? In favor?
I'm just gonna abstain.
Okay, 1 in favor,
Abstain.
2 abstain, okay.
Take it in.
So it passes. We'll have fun in December. Glad we have an experienced chair. Anything else?
Just an interesting thing in the borough president's report, which I don't know if everybody, that was distributed at the forum. If people haven't read it yet, read it. It was interesting at the forum, Ed Pinker noted that residential permit parking couldn't happen without action from Albany first, and it's not in their power. And in the report, in the conclusion section, there's a former DOT testimony in 2018 that said the same thing, but then the report goes on to say there is, however, another legal view that blah, 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 blah. New York City does have the necessary authority and that courts would support an RPP program as long as sufficient metered spots are still made available to visitors, but it doesn't cite like where that legal view
But
might
I've
come
heard
from or
that as
anything,
well.
so
Yeah.
just an interesting
Yeah.
conflicting viewpoint, and as DOT may be looking at these things and what they're willing to do,
They're looking
if
for
they
an
say
excuse.
Albany
Yeah.
can't,
really
we're
didn't
not
wanna
allowed
do
to,
it.
Yeah.
that is of interest.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.